Welcome to The Point, a podcast by Apex Benefits and dedicated to employee benefits thought leadership. You can find more episodes for free on iTunes by searching The Point or Apex Benefits. Please rate, review, and subscribe to be the first to know about what we have in store for you. To learn more about Apex Benefits, please visit our website at www.apexbg.com or find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, or Twitter. Let's get to the point together.
Okay, well, we're here today with Edie, and it's World Clinical Trials Day. So I feel very honored to be spending it with Edie because she herself is in clinical trials. So today's discussion here on the Point podcast with Apex Benefits, we really wanted to focus in on vaccine clinical trials relative to COVID-19. So Edie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Erin. Always a pleasure to chat with you, see it from a different point of view and present my own. And yes, World Clinical Trials Day. Super pumped about that. As nerdy as that makes us both sound, it's a great day, especially during these challenging times, to sit back and really appreciate the industry that I'm so incredibly grateful to be a part of.
Yeah, so can you share with our audience your background in clinical trials and your passion?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been in the world of research and compliance as it relates to clinical trials now for a little over a decade. I'm currently consulting with First Class Solutions out of the St. Louis area. They have a great practice in the healthcare space, and I'm helping expand it into the research and clinical trial space. And so I have the unique opportunity to work with, both large hospital systems and AMCs, as well as individual research sites in building their programs, bettering their programs, reaching more patients, having more efficient workflows, ensuring they're meeting all those tough regulatory standards so that they can really take that great data they're going to generate and contribute to the next innovation. Of course, right now I've gotten to work with all those clients during COVID. So it's been another great learning curve in my career in terms of experiencing just what's happening out there.
Yeah, thanks for that background. So today we really want to dig in specifically to vaccines, clinical trials for COVID-19. Our economies really depend on, at least in part, getting a vaccine approved by FDA soon in order to get back to work. And we're never going to get back to 0% risk. We talked about that offline. But, can you briefly explain what's going on with clinical trials around the COVID-19 vaccine for some of us that maybe aren't watching it from the direct sidelines?
Sure. So this is really unprecedented. I mean, not that you don't have a lot of different clinical research stakeholders working on different areas such as oncology or other really well-known, healthcare problems, right, that affect us globally, not just in America. But right now you have companies working together that normally might even be competing with one another in this space, right? And it's a race globally, truly. And so you're seeing so many different players from so many different spaces, mostly being kind of driven by what we would call big pharma, large pharmaceutical companies that often sponsor clinical trials in this space, but definitely in utilization, right, and in combination with academic medical centers, large hospital systems, freestanding clinical research sites to actually begin the testing of a vaccine. And I think the important framework here, you certainly don't have to be all nerded out in my business and doing what I do to understand kind of just a really ballpark for my clinical research folks out there. This is ballpark, right? But it's about a 10-year life cycle for the average, quote unquote, drug to make it to market. So from the moment we have we begin that preclinical assessment of something that we think is going to make a difference in a certain therapeutic area, to all the phase 1 trials, all the way through to the end, to actually getting that regulatory approval by the FDA and you seeing your pharmacist or your physician provide it to you, right, through prescriptive measures. That's usually about 10 years, and it's usually about $1 billion for one company to do it. So you're seeing so many companies do this at the same time. I don't think we've ever had a time in clinical research where everyone was so pinpoint focused on one particular need. And so from that, we're seeing an environment that's very interesting. We're fast tracking that 10 years. We're moving out of the preclinical phase into actual first-in-human testing at warp speed, literally. Operation Warp Speed is not ill-named. And you're seeing companies, like I said, that would normally compete work together. And there's good and there's badness to have all this attention on it and all these resources on it. I mean, that can't be a bad thing, right? That means we're going to get there even faster. And to be working so closely with agencies in America, the FDA, but of course, outside of America, we have other similarly situated agencies to get through some of the regulatory tape and burden at a much faster pace. I cannot advocate for that. I think some of the burden and some of the cost and the time associated with that 10-year timeline is ridiculous. We have needed some ways to expedite and get there faster and make it better. So this is a perfect example of when we try hard, we sure seem like we can make a big difference. But you're also seeing a little bit of backlash right now, because now we're starting to figure out just how many vaccines are being pitched at one time. Are our organizations that are working on this, are they actually coordinated? Are we coordinating by country? Are we coordinating by region? Because what we don't want to see is so many people focused and geared up to work on this and people repeating other people's work, right? Because that's just going to place us right back into that burdensome, tiresome infrastructure we've been living in for a while now and slow us down. And so it's just been really interesting. Of course, the news has hit this week about the first in-human vaccine trial actually showing some positive data. Now, I will say that's really limited for folks who didn't read past the sensationalized headline of, vaccine trial shows promise. It was 8 people. Okay, that's a non-statistically significant sample size. And again, phase 1 is very much a first in human. We need a completely healthy volunteer to come forward and let us determine if this is even safe, and if it is, what types of dosing levels we need to play with to get it to a truly efficacious state, right? And I know I'm preaching to the choir, of course, Erin, because you're Miss Pharmacist Extraordinaire over there, so you know the pharmacokinetics and safety issues of this better than even myself, probably, truly. But that's about what it looks like right now. And we've got 8 vaccine trials going right now. And then we have about 12 more. So they're thinking by the end of 2020, it's predicted you'll have, give or take, 20 vaccine trials that will actually be in human testing, have started phase 1 or have moved along, right? So there's 8 being actually tested now, 12 more predicted to be in that testing phase by the end of 2020. And again, it's huge companies. You've got, Sanofi, you've got Johnson & Johnson, obviously we've heard about Moderna this week. You've got tiny biotech, you've got academic medical centers, often known as AMCs. So there's a unique timeline for each of these, right? And I think the other important thing to realize is just because you're first also won't guarantee that you're best, right? We may very well get to a vaccine in record time that then may later be replaced, right, by a better option, a 2.0, like we often do. So I think that again, we're moving at record speed, and I'm so glad to see it, but we're also probably a little optimistic on some of our timelines for how quickly we're probably not going to go from a 10-year life cycle to a 9-month life cycle. That's not realistic.
Yeah, so great segue. That's actually my next question. But according to the Biotechnology Innovation Organization, to your point, Edie, there's dozen or so companies globally looking at this, working in partnership or alone on a COVID-19 vaccine. So great segue to my next question. Taking that 10-year timeline and realistically cramming it down, what's that realistic number? The CEO of Novartis, he's no longer in the vaccine business because they've divested of that business, but he did provide in a Reuters article May 15th that the COVID vaccine will take at least 2 years. Realistically, working within the clinical trial space, Edie, what do you, and I know you're whipping out your crystal ball right now.
Right. Yeah, you're asking a lawyer to predict time? What?
Well,
a pharmacist lawyer asking another lawyer, like, okay, all right, okay, take all those hats off. No, I'm just razzing it. No, it is, right? And no one wants to be like the negative naysayer in this moment of solidarity and, like I said, unprecedented, truly, coordination in terms of former competitors being allies But I do think that the CEO of Novartis has a much more realistic timeline. I will say that. I would be, as I lovingly say to folks when asked this on the regular, for one of the few times in my life, I would love to be wrong with what I'm about to say, but I do not predict that we will have a sound approved vaccine that I and others who are knowledgeable in our industry would feel good about taking personally and giving to our own families before 2021. I don't see how we can move that quickly. We would have to be reducing the number of subjects in trials. We would have to be speeding through the phases. And while, like I said, much of that 10-year life cycle does need to be worked on and expedited and have the dust blown off and really ask, do we need all these regulatory burdens? Do we need all these compliance functions? Do we need absolute certainty before we can put things forth? I mean, it does need to be shortened. And this is an opportunity for our industry to lobby and advocate. But I think even your most aggressive individuals in clinical research are still going to say it still has to be good science, okay? And it still has to be good data. And you have to think about the population at large that will be taking this vaccine the moment it drops. And that's what is really the scientific game changer about why you have to go through certain phases of the clinical trials, why it has to be tested in so many different types of populations. Now, could we get to a vaccine by early 2021 that was maybe for a very select population? Like maybe we have enough safety data on one unique population to say we think you could be using it? Maybe, but that's not how the normal life cycle works. You wouldn't be going to FDA approval in that fashion. Now, you will hear people talking about emergency use approvals. For some folks, they associate that with right to try. For those of us in the industry, we associate it more with what we would call an expanded access protocol. And so, you know, that will happen before the actual public release of the vaccine. It is a bit of a complicated process, but it's something the FDA does honor and does work with. And essentially, if someone has no other treatment or alternative left other than, you know, the facts are on the table, they're not going to survive. And we're far enough along in some of these vaccine trials, and they have good enough data from a safety and efficacy perspective, certain providers can then ask for an emergency use approval to provide what is still very much an investigational vaccine at that point and time or therapy to a patient. But that's not going to be broad use, right? That's not going to be how the whole general public receives the vaccine. That's going to be in very unique cases. So I think you could see expanded access in early 2021. I could see that. I could, right? By early spring, I could see that happening where we'd be far enough along in our safety and efficacy data. But broad distribution of an actually approved vaccine, I mean, if we have it by next summer, I'd be pretty impressed. I really would. Now, I think the other part of this is, right, that people have forgotten that vaccine's not the only thing we're working on out there. Obviously, we feel safest with a vaccine, but even a vaccine's not 100%. There's all sorts of cases of folks who take, you know, a flu vaccine shot, get the flu, did get vaccinated appropriately as a child, was for certain immunizations, and did unfortunately still contract something. So it's not the complete answer to all of our problems. Even if a vaccine was available tomorrow, that doesn't change our need to distance. It doesn't change our need to use PPE appropriately, and so forth. And the other side of that coin is we're also still working on treatment and therapy protocols that are not vaccinations, that are actually how we're going to treat a COVID patient. And those will move faster through the research life cycle than the actual approval of a vaccine. Getting approval of a drug, a biologic, a vaccine, a device takes much longer usually than just the actual research-based approval of a therapy using already approved drugs, devices, and biologics that then need to be run back through the system for a new indication. You still have to go through. It's still investigational because you might be using something that's already approved, like remdesivir that we've talked about, for a previously non-intended purpose that has not been researched. So it has to go back through that process. But again, therapy trials tend to move much faster, and already even in our burdensome pre-COVID life cycle setup, we're closer to, you know, a 6 or 7 year mark than that 8 to 10. And so I think that, while we're all hopeful that the vaccine moves faster and we're looking at that as our absolute answer to everything, I think it's important to remember that here in the next 6 months, I actually expect us to see some serious progress on possible therapies and treatment for folks once positive. And that in combination with the vaccine is what our total sum answer is, right? It's not that we're going to be able to prevent absolutely everyone from ever getting COVID, even with a phenomenal vaccine, no matter when it drops. That's not actually what a vaccine is. It's the fact that you have a vaccine to help a broad number of the population, as well as having an actual treatment for those who do still contract it, or for whatever reason we're not vaccinated and are seeking treatment for it. So we're going to have treatment. I do think that's something we can look forward to by the end of 2020. I feel very confident about it. And so I think that is something that's kind of gotten overshot by the vaccine, right? And I do think that's something that'll move faster.
So you alluded to a Star Trek reference earlier, Operation Warp Speed. I think it came from Star Trek. Yes. So for those of us that have COVID fatigue in the media, I know myself is included in that.
Yep, I do too.
Talk about something other than COVID.
Anything.
But Operation Warp Speed has come out of the Trump administration. Can you share kind of your thoughts on that initiative and kind of?
Yeah, so I've posted a little bit on LinkedIn about, and it goes back to what I was saying at the beginning. Now that we actually have everyone in the clinical research world's attention, and I do mean every single possible stakeholder, and everyone has done this quick, pivot to focusing every resource that they have toward COVID, there's a bit of a concern in our industry that if this is not coordinated well, we will have a lot of replicated efforts, right? And we'll get back into that competitive adversarial world that then does somewhat, that plus, of course, regulatory burden, lengthen the process. And we won't have really learned and walked away from this. So I actually applaud the concept of.
You can find more episodes for free on iTunes by searching The Point or Apex Benefits. Please rate, review, and subscribe to be the first to know about what we have in store for you. To learn more about Apex Benefits, please visit our website at www.apexbg.com or find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, or Twitter. Let's get to the point together.